Want to be a topper in MBA entrance exams? Join BYJU'S Exam Prep, CAT and MBA YouTube channel and watch serial 99 percentiles teaching you the tips and tricks.
Hi everyone, good morning. Welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. My name is Alpa Sharma and this is our editorial analysis. How are you guys today? Can you hear and see me clearly, everyone? Very good morning. I hope everything's clearly audible, visible to everybody. I have a very interesting piece of article for you today. So if you could quickly confirm that you can hear and see me clearly, we shall commence with the session. I hope everything's great, everything's audible, everything's visible. Yes, dear. Thank you for confirming. I hope all of you are doing great. And let's look at the agenda of the session today. So I am going to be taking one article today, which is a little long, okay? And usually what we do, we take Aeon articles on Thursday. And last week, I think we couldn't take an Aeon article. So today we have an Aeon article. But I have modified the article a little, okay? I've made some changes here. Let's see what changes I've made. I did not take out the vocabulary. So we will try to memorize, just a minute. We will try to find out the meaning of the vocabulary word through the context. Okay. So I will be highlighting the words and you have to tell me the meaning through the context by reading the sentence, by reading the paragraph. Because there are times when so many words in the articles appear that we do not know the meaning of. How do we handle them? That's what we're going to be aiming at. I have plus brought some questions from in between the passage. I don't have options. I will expect you to answer that. Some inference questions, some one tone question as well, one summary question as well, and many other questions from between the lines. Okay. So we are, no, not the haunted one. And there's one more, apart from bringing questions, there's another thing that I've done. And that is I've eliminated the title of the article and the gist of the article that's written in the beginning. I've pasted it towards the end. So, because in the examination, you'll never have the title, right? So, I've hidden it and we'll read it like an RC, and without knowing what the gist is, what the topic is, we'll try to understand that what exactly is the author aiming at. So, that is what we're going to be doing. So, I'll not tell you, hi everyone, hi Vinay, Anshuman, and everyone else. Very good morning. Okay. So, yeah, exactly. That's what dictionary makers do. So, intellect tense, yes. And we are going to be figuring out the contextual meaning. So, no vocabulary meanings in the initial slide, no intro in the beginning of the article. We'll just start reading it like an RC and we'll try to figure out. One more thing, the article is not a cakewalk. So, I'll expect you to go slow, but I'll expect you to be very careful with what the author is trying to say. It's more of a philosophical one. It's been a while we haven't taken a philosophical article. So here it is. But before I show you the article, a few things. Meet our Unstoppables of CAT 2021. We've got Prathamesh, Ashish, Vishwanath and many more. And I'm sure you could also be one of those people. Next year probably we'll be displaying your picture. If you want to make sure that you are one of those people, make sure you enroll yourself right away for the CAT 22 comprehensive program where you trained under the guidance of serial 100 99 percentilers. They are your gurus here. Look no further, speak to our counselors on the contact number that's displayed in the scroll that's going on in the bottom bar. Now, ready for the article, everyone? Oh, I didn't press. I'll check it today. Okay, I'll check it today. Good morning, Vijay. So, ready with the article? Shall I show you the article? Diya, let's look at the page, okay? Let's understand what the article is about. Here you go. Read the page, okay? The entire page. And first, answer the meaning of incomprehension, not the meaning of the word. After you read the page, answer what exactly is he trying to say by quoting the word incomprehension here is my question. Now read the page, everyone. Good luck. Okay. Intelligence, you say it's misunderstanding. Let me wait for other people to answer. Not relatable. Okay. All right. Others, what do you think the author means when he says it is also due to incomprehension? What is he trying to say here? Less knowledge and misunderstanding? Agreed. Hard to understand? Agreed. Absolutely. So basically, the author talks about the Buddhist philosophy here. Okay. And see, Buddhist philosophy belongs to our country and the country that surrounds India. So when Western philosophers talk about Buddhist philosophy, they actually are not very impressed with the idea of Buddhist philosophy. They don't follow it wholeheartedly. They don't show a lot of enthusiasm when they talk about Buddhist philosophy. They call it mysticism. Why do they call it mysticism? Because see, if you remember, in the last 2 weeks, we had done one article on philosophy, and I taught you how philosophy was completely based on logic and debates. You remember the article we had done where women philosophers were not given importance in as the cult of philosophy? Yes, and we saw that these women were equal part of debates and applying logic to the men counterparts, yet they were not given importance. So, philosophy is basically logic based, detail based, debate based, yet they call Buddhist philosophy mysticism. Mysticism is an imaginary world that you create that's unreal, okay, and that's not applicable by logic. So, they call it mysticism. And the attitude Western philosophers have is one, because they are ignorant of the Western philosophy, of the Buddhist philosophy. Two, they also use this word mysticism and no enthusiasm because they probably are unable to understand the Buddhist philosophy at all. Okay, yes, we talked about muses. Yes, so they don't understand Buddhist philosophy at all, and that's exactly why they don't show a lot of enthusiasm towards Buddhist philosophy. When Western philosophers look east, they find things they do not understand. Of course, for us they're west, for we are east, and when they look at the east, they say, okay, we don't understand these things because there are contradictions in the east where they see. Simple contradiction. They eat with a fork and knife, we eat with hands. Okay, that's a simple example of contradiction. And east for them is full of contradictions and abhorrence of contradiction. What is abhorrence here? Abhorrence is hatred, a completely negative opinion about contradiction. So they say if there's something that contradicts us, we would hate it. So Buddhist philosophy, can I infer, is a philosophy that is contradictory to the Western philosophy? Can I infer this here? I'll repeat. Can I infer this here that Buddhist philosophy is contrary to the Western philosophy? And that's why they actually either hate it or they don't understand it? Indian YouTuber, a little, yes. Can I infer this here, everyone? That Buddhist philosophy is partly or completely contradictory to the Western philosophy? Because they have a hatred for contradictions. Yes, probably, yes, you could say that. Probably, not certainly. We don't have ample of information about that. But probably there's contradiction that they see in the Buddhist philosophy. Statements such as Nagarjuna's, we don't know who Nagarjuna is right now. He'll be referred to again in the later on paragraphs. So statements such as Nagarjuna's are therefore won't produce looks of blank incomprehension or worse. So people don't understand that. One can hear similar sentiments expressed with comparable ferocity in many faculty common rooms today. What are these common rooms? What are these faculty common rooms? What are they referring to? Yes, somewhat. You're right, Indian YouTuber. Somewhat. Now, what are these faculty common rooms? What is it that he's referring to? One can hear similar sentiments expressed with comparable ferocity in many faculty common rooms today. Okay, I'll explain that again, Devansh. First, answer this question. It could be scientific labs. It could be a place where philosophers and teachers of philosophy come together and discuss philosophy. Okay? And even in those places where you have philosophers and teachers of philosophy coming together discussing philosophy, they have a peculiar dislike or non-inclination towards the Buddhist philosophy. We're like-minded people. Yes, Prats. So these like-minded people are people who are inclined towards philosophy. Even they have this similar attitude about Buddhist philosophy. Okay. Incomprehension, Devansh, here the author uses incomprehension by saying Western philosophers either don't understand, incomprehension is not being able to understand. So either Western philosophers are not being able to understand Western philosophy, or they're just too ignorant, they don't pay attention to Buddhist philosophy even if they're capable of understanding. Thus, their point of view about Buddhist philosophy is like this. They either hate it or they are not inclined towards it. So here incomprehension is they are unable to understand what did Buddha say about philosophy. Exactly, Indian YouTuber, you're right. Why don't you change your name, Indian YouTuber? It could be a staff room as well. Yet, Western philosophers are slowly learning to outgrow their parochialism. What does parochialism mean? They are learning to outgrow their parochialism. What does that mean? The next line will help you find the answer. Cohort is absolutely right, Prads. Absolutely right. A word for this phrase. What is parochialism? Think, think, think. Don't Google. Even if you don't know, think, read the line. Exactly. So parochialism is a narrow-minded, old-fashioned belief where you're not open to accepting new things beyond you. That's parochialism, an old-fashioned, narrow-minded belief. And so when Western philosophers don't show inclination or enthusiasm towards towards Buddhist philosophy, it's their parochialism only. But now, see, when you see yet, there's a contradiction in the passage, and I always say pay attention to those lines. Those lines are very, very important. So he says, yet Western philosophers are now learning to grow out of their parochialism, to grow out of their narrow-mindedness. They probably are showing inclination towards Buddhist philosophy, or trying to understand what does the Eastern philosophy say. And how is this inclination coming now? Surprisingly, through modern mathematical logic. Is mathematical logic related to philosophy? It is, because philosophy also is based on logic, and so is mathematics. When we talk about philosophy, a lot of philosophical concepts can be explained using the mathematical logic. You'll see instances in the passage as well. Okay, now let's come to the next page and let's understand an example of a mathematical logic that explains a philosophy here. You can skim through this page. This page does only have an explanation, so you'll understand what the author's point of view is. The next page has questions. So skim through this page, everyone. Anshuman, this article is from the Aeon. A very simply written page, right? It basically explains how the Buddhist philosophy worked. Okay. Now, while he tries to talk about the Buddhist philosophy, he introduces you to the philosophical concept of the kataskoti. And he says this concept of kataskoti, the first paragraph says, the concept of kataskoti meant there are four corners. Did you understand the four corners, everyone? It's a very factual paragraph. Okay? Four corners. Very mathematical, very logical. So every concept, everything that you talk about in terms of philosophy will have four corners. Either it is absolutely true, it is absolutely false, it is neither true or neither false. Okay? So there are these four corners, and every question can be answered through these four corners. Now there's a question that I'd like to ask you. We know that kataskoti was in air because of the certain questions that people asked the Buddha. Why? So in the air means it was being talked about. Why was kataskoti in the air? Why do you think was kataskoti in the air? Why were people talking about it? What did you understand from the second paragraph? Why was kataskoti in the air when people spoke about Buddha? Why was it making news? Why were people talking about it? Why was kataskoti in the air in reference to Buddha? People to people? Yeah, that's right. Roosters. Oh, roosters. Okay. Maybe because it was one of the principles he said. Okay. Difference of opinions. Okay. Yes. See, if you look at the second half of the second paragraph, there are questions that are being put to Buddha. Okay. Questions like what happens to us after death? Do we have an answer to it? We probably not in science, but every philosophy, every religion tries to give you an answer to this. Buddha tried to answer questions through kataskoti. A clear answer. Yes, no, neither yes, neither no. And when questions were put up to Buddha where the answers were unknown to anyone, kataskoti was in the air because you expected Buddha to give you an answer in these plain four terms, like an objective paper. Right? Exactly, Devansh. Yes. Because his thinking was different from traditional thinking. Yes. Maybe because he was one of the principles he had said, okay, because the principle shared by Buddha. Yes, Anshuman, you're right. Now see, understand this, everyone. I'll explain this again. Kataskoti was in the air because there were many questions that nobody had answers for. And when they reached Buddha, they expected Buddha to answer this question into a binary answer. Okay, so these are the four options. You click one. That's what the expectation from Buddha was. Do you think Buddha answered it? Do you think Buddha answered it? What do you think would happen next? Could Buddha answer these questions through kataskoti? A simple answer? True, false, neither true, neither false, both true and false. Could he answer that with kataskoti? What do you think? Anticipate it through the last line. Anticipate my answer through the last line. Yes, that's an example, Dia, and these examples are basically referring to questions where Western philosophy didn't have an answer for that. So they expected Buddha to use kataskoti and answer these questions. Read the last line, you'll know my answer. Did Buddha answer it through kataskoti? The last line says, this is, it appears, was just how people thought. But in reality, now did you get the hint? How do we anticipate? He said, people went to Buddha and they asked, Buddha, please answer. What happens to an unenlightened person after his death? Is he reborn? Is he not reborn? What happens? When you ask Buddha this question and you expect an answer through catascoti, this, it appears, was just how people thought. Now, probably Buddha did not answer this question very directly because people thought such things could be answered. Apparently, people thought it could be answered through catascoti. But in reality, probably the answers weren't as simple as catascoti. Did you agree with me? That's how you anticipate. Let's move on to the next page and let's see. That's how people think that catascoti can answer these questions. Writing in his Metaphysics, Aristotle defended both of these principles against transgressors, such as these. Unfortunately, Aristotle's own arguments are somewhat tortured. So, we'll leave that Buddha paragraph behind, okay? We'll come back to that later on. There's another example of speaking of Aristotle, of course, because we are here in comparison with the Western philosophy and the Buddhist philosophy. So, Buddha and the Eastern philosophy. So, Eastern philosophy, we have to mention Buddha, and Western philosophy, we can't proceed without mentioning Aristotle, okay? So, Aristotle gave some arguments and his own arguments were somewhat tortured. And he says, I have put it mildly. So, that torture is actually high. Okay, he says torture is a mild word that I've put. But Aristotle's arguments were actually probably beaten down to mud. And modern scholars find it difficult even to say that they are supposed to be. Yet, Aristotle succeeded in locking the PEM and PNC into Western orthodoxy. So, he's basically mixing up mathematical logic to the philosophy. Till now, did you understand here? Yes, now let's move on. Let's see how is it linked to the Buddhist philosophy. That is why Western thinkers, even those sympathetic to Buddhist thought like Aristotle, have struggled to grasp how something such as catascoti might be possible. Aristotle here is used, understand this everyone, Aristotle here is used as an example who somewhat promoted philosophy that related to the Buddhist philosophy. Yet, his philosophy was tortured. You have put it mildly. It was tremendously tortured. And that is why Western thinkers, even those who are sympathetic to Buddhist thought, have struggled to grasp how something such as catascoti might be possible. Why have Western philosophers struggled is my question. Why have Western philosophers struggled? Think carefully. Answer. Because people didn't believe their philosophy. Agreed, Diya? Agreed. Even if they were sympathetic towards Buddhist philosophy, they just didn't agree. And that's exactly why they had questioned Aristotle's philosophy as well, because it was against their agreement. So since they questioned Aristotle's philosophy, their own Western philosophy, agreeing with Buddhist philosophy was a far-fetched dream. They did not agree with it. Because they are different. Yes, Kinjal. You're right. Did everyone get the answer here? Why did they struggle? Send me a thumbs up very quickly. Yes. Agreed. Now, guys, see, I've made these questions. Why have I made these questions? Because you, while you're reading an extract, are supposed to ask these questions to yourself. Suddenly, Aristotle comes up. The previous paragraph talk of Buddha, Aristotle comes up. What is the relation? You ask yourself. How are the two paragraphs related? That's what mind mapping is. You relate both the paragraphs. Once you draw the relationship, the next paragraph automatically becomes a cakewalk for you. You understand that's exactly why the struggling happened. Had I not explained this paragraph, you should have asked this question to yourself. What is the relationship between Aristotle, Buddha, and probably is that the reason why the Western philosophers still struggled to believe into Catascotti? Because Catascotti was a simple way of answering questions, philosophical questions, and they didn't agree to it. Western philosophers didn't agree to it, and that's exactly why they had abused Aristotelian concept of philosophy as well. Okay, great. Let's move on with the next page. More questions to come up, but before that, did you hit a like button? If you haven't done that, please do. Please hit the like button, share button, and subscribe button as well. Read this page. I'll ask you questions here. अंशुमन ये क्लास Tuesdays and Thursdays 10 AM होती है. Okay, just a minute. I'll go back. This paragraph goes on. Okay, I've cut it short. This paragraph actually explained mathematical logic and justifying how Aristotle used it and Buddha used it. Okay, so I have eliminated that paragraph. Now this one. So now you know Buddha refused to answer. People believed Catascotti could be used to answer such contradictory questions, open-ended questions. Buddha refused to answer this. See, you might actually be struggling understanding this paragraph because it was a relation to a paragraph I had omitted, the mathematical example one. So, examples of this kind are basically examples that are used, mathematical examples rather, to define how these questions are actually contradictory to the Buddhist philosophy. So what is important in this paragraph is lines like these. We'll need to keep those blinkers off as we return to those tricky questions. Let's come back. Mathematical formula couldn't answer such questions. So let's come back to those questions from the Buddha's perspective. From Buddha's perspective, that what happens to us after that? Things are going to get only more disconcerting here on in. He says, you'll not be happy. You'll not be satisfied with the answer. What happens to you after that if you're looking for an answer here? Buddha said, it's a waste of your time. Either he said that or he says, the four corners of Catascotti that were defined, true, false, both true and false, neither true and false. None of the four Catascotti principles could be used to answer this question. It doesn't fit the case. More like a mathematical logic. Yeah. Okay, tell me guys, how many of you still struggle with philosophical articles? How many of you still struggle with philosophical articles because they are pretty popular in MBA entrance examinations? Because if you look at it from the logic perspective, you'll find it actually, you'll be inclined towards it. So how many of you still struggle with philosophical articles? I've attempted at doing a couple of articles with you to make you okay with it. But I'd like to know that. How many of you still struggle with it? Nobody? Rarely. That's great. Anshuman, you just need to be regular, okay? Sai, you do? All right. Yeah, that's the whole point. So you need to get a hang of it, okay? You just need to understand. You don't have to understand all the philosophical concepts. You just have to understand how philosophy works, how are philosophical concepts made, and you just need to follow the logic, because this entire examination is logic based. So if you try to find logic in the philosophical articles, understanding it would be a cakewalk for you. That's exactly what's happening here. Four corners, pretty logical. Yeah. So I had economics as well. Economics, we haven't done an economic article in a while. I think we should be taking one. No, but then I think on Thursday, I'll be taking an extract. You remember what we had done last Thursday? You would like to do that again with me? I'll bring extracts from previous year papers and I'll make questions on them. We'll be doing that. We had a lot of discussion that day. I'm sure you loved the class. If you haven't seen the last class, make sure you do that. So we now know Buddha didn't answer. He said, oh, it's either a waste of time or none of the four principles of Catascotti fits here. Let's move on. Here, now we have an inference. For a long time, this riddle lay dormant in Buddhist philosophy. Riddle, what happens to us after death? It remained dormant. Now, can you anticipate what happens further? When he says, for the longest time, it remained dormant, probably in the next few lines, he'll say, it came back again. That's the reason why he's focusing on the fact that it was dormant. Probably it resurfaces again. It only was around the 2nd century CE that it was taken up by Nagarjuna. So now you know who Nagarjuna is. One of the Indian Eastern philosophers who brought up the idea of Catascotti, or rather brought up the idea of answering such contentious questions again, where there was a lot of debate and probably four corners of Catascotti could answer such questions. Nagarjuna brought it up again after being dormant for many years. Probably the most important and influential Buddhist philosopher after the Buddha himself. So the author is praising him here. He said he was very influential. He brought the question again. Let's see if he could answer what happened to us after death. Okay, there's a question that we have. Ma'am, मैंने 60+ आर्टिकल पढ़े हैं बट कंफ्यूजन अभी भी है, तो स्कोर 0 से 60 हो गया. Okay, all right. And where have you read these articles from, Anshuman? You struggle with science? You know, guys, I'll tell you something. That's exactly why eclectic reading is what we focus on, and not try to take articles that are based on one topic, because if we read from a variety of sources, that's how we get comfortable with economics or science, and very likely you're uncomfortable with science or economics or philosophy because you haven't had that subject in your school. That's very likely going to be the reason. So that's why what we aim at, bringing articles from various sources so that you get comfortable with those common names, like Aristotle, for example, comfortable with those common principles like Catascotti. And I'll be bringing economics and science articles as well. Okay, so let's get back to it. So Nagarjuna brought up the issue. Let's see if Nagarjuna could answer the question, what happens to us after death? Nagarjuna's writings define the new version of Buddhism that was emerging at the time. So Mahayana, probably a new version of Buddhist philosophy, was written by Nagarjuna. Very factual. Central to his teachings is the view that things are empty. I'll not explain that. This does not mean that they are non-existent, only that they are what they are because of how they relate to other things. What does the author say here, my kids? Answer this. What does the author say here? Read this twice, you'll get the answer. That's a very good practice, Anshuman. That's a very good practice. Now what's your score presently? How much do you get in verbal tests? He says it's shunya. But that does not mean it is not non-existent. Let me see. You will certainly get a question if this article appears in the examination on this line. That's why I love Aeon articles. Everything is what it is as it has influence from its surroundings. I would agree with you, Prads, that things are hard to explain, so leaves them unexplained. But that doesn't mean that they have nothing deep. No, Dia, you misunderstood it. Basically, this line aims at explaining Nagarjuna's concept of Mahayana. The concept of Mahayana, everyone pay attention here. The concept of Mahayana says that everything is empty, zero. Empty in the sense that anything does not hold any value. The value to it comes from the things that are related to it. What is this? It's nothing till I write with it. So writing gives this thing its value as a pen. Otherwise, it's zero. It's shunya. That does not mean that the pen is non-existent. The pen exists, but how it relates to other things, the surrounding things, would give this pen its value. In itself, it is valueless. It's zero. That is what the line means. There are many people writing it. I'd like to read that. Okay, so Raj says, he probably meant to say that there is no point of the question individually. It should be considered as a part of a bigger picture, Raj. Perfect. Verbal. Okay, Anshuman, I'll answer this question towards the end. Did you understand this, everyone? Raj, for the first time, I see your comment in the chat box. Anshuman, you are getting a very good score. Stick with me for my classes. We'll make sure that philosophy is no more a problem for you. Okay? All right. So, I hope you understand what is the concept of Mahayana. How will this Mahayana concept help us answer a basic question, what happens to us after death? Let's see if Mahayana can make us understand that. As the quotation at the beginning of the essay explains, you don't know what the quotation was, right? I'll explain it to you towards the end. Their nature is to have no intrinsic nature. They don't have an intrinsic nature. What their nature is dependent on the things that surround it. So other things, the related things, give something its nature. Individually, it has nothing. It's shunya. Okay? Read this line. This line can also make an inference question. At the task of making precise logical sense to the claim that everything is zero, I leave for the reader to ponder. Suffice it to say it can be done. Why does the author leave it for you to ponder? Because he doesn't want to put any value to anything. He wants you to think it. Because everything is zero. So when you think about it, you think it from a different perspective. Western philosophers thought it from a different perspective, and you put value to something. The thing is absolutely valueless. It's zero. So you think and decide what this argument means. So he's actually playing with the words here. He's going with the theme of the passage, giving his opinion here. Okay, let's see here. The most important of Nagarjuna's writing is I'll not even read the word. Basically means the fundamental verses of the middle way. Factual. It's a profound and cryptic book whose principal theme is precisely that everything is empty. We've understood that everything is zero. In the course of making his arguments, Nagarjuna often runs through the 4 cases of kataskoti. So, he doesn't deviate from kataskoti. He says everything is zero, linking it to kataskoti. In some places, moreover, he clearly states that there are situations in which none of the 4 applies. Like Buddha said, answering the questions, and when none of the 4 applies, comes the concept of zero. When none of the 4 corners of kataskoti are applicable, then comes the concept of zero, comes the concept of shunya, Mahayana. So, they don't cover the status of an enlightened person after death, for example. We can't answer what happens to you after death. That isn't answered through the kataskoti principles. What might that be? Nagarjuna's reasoning is somewhat opaque. Now guys, read this paragraph because it will make up your main idea, your tone of the author as well. Read this paragraph everyone and send me a done. Anshuman, with the track you're in, I'm sure with the kind of reading that you're doing and practicing that you're doing, you inshallah will be into your dream college. You just need to know exactly what lines you need to pay attention to. All right, so basically he says Nagarjuna's reasoning is he would not give meaning to anything because everything is ineffable. Ineffable means something that cannot be described. Anything cannot be described. What meaning we give to, for example, again, pen. What meaning do we give to it? It's surrounding things. The language gives it meaning. Otherwise, it's meaningless. So he says, and everything in the world cannot be explained. They're meaningless. So some religion would say you would be reborn after death. Some would say you would go to the god and there would be a test. There are many philosophies about what happens to us after death. What are these philosophies? These are basically the meanings that we give. Nagarjuna said we could not define them. There's no meaning we could give to it. In particular, one cannot describe it by using any four possibilities at least of catastrophe. We can't define what happens to you after death. So we can say Nagarjuna was on the same page as Buddha was. They were in accordance here. Okay? But there is, of course, much more to be said about all these matters. But we have now seen something of the lie of the land. Lie of the land is you know everything. You've understood where things are placed. Lie of the land is okay when you go on a trek, you know this is where the stream is, this is where the trees are. You know everything by heart. So that's the lie of the land. So let me end by stepping back and asking what lessons are to be drawn from all this. So we're coming to a conclusion here. He says, nothing certainly can be said about all this, but can we conclude something towards the end? Let's see what can be concluded. One conclusion is a familiar one. Mathematical techniques often find unexpected applications. Unexpected applications to answering questions like life after death as well. Through the four corners. Yeah. Group theory has developed in the 19th century. It basically explains the idea of how mathematical techniques can find its place in unexpected applications. We saw mathematical techniques finding its place in philosophy. Okay. The second lesson we conclude through the whole passage is quite different and more striking. What is this conclusion that we draw? Buddhist thought and Asian thought in general has often been written off by Western philosophers. They discard it. You write it off like bad debts. So they don't pay attention to it. That's one more thing that we conclude. How can contradictions be true? What's all this talk of ineffability? That's all nonsense. So they don't pay attention to it. The constructions I have described show how to make precise mathematical sense of Buddhist views. Through this line, what can you say about the author's point of view regarding the Buddhist philosophy? How does he look? Author, not the Western philosophers. How does the author look at the Buddhist philosophy? How does the author look at the Buddhist philosophy? Not the Western philosophers. What do you think? author looks at the Buddhist philosophy from a positive perspective, unlike the Western philosophers. Exactly, Raj. He is in support. He is trying to understand the Buddhist philosophy in opposition to the Western philosophers. Supporting, yes, he is supporting. He says mathematical logic can be applied to Buddhist views. So, how can you, being a Western philosopher, discard Buddhist philosophy? He is absolutely in support of the Buddhist philosophy. So, this is the second conclusion that he draws, that Western philosophers, they actually loathe Buddhist philosophy. I myself find it very, very logical. This does not, of course, show that they are true. That's a different matter, if Buddhist philosophy is true or not, but you can find mathematical implications there. But it does show that these ideas can be made as logically rigorous and coherent as the ideas can be. If the Buddhist philosophy is true or not, we don't know, but they are logical, as the Buddha may or may not have said, or both or neither. You see, this line is so fun. He actually wrote this line from the perspective of Catascotti. When he says Buddha may have said or may not have said, because Catascotti, or both or neither as well, there are only two mistakes one can make along the road of truth, along the road to truth. That's a quotation by Buddha. Not going all the way and not starting. So if you are somebody, what does the line infer here? Okay. What can we infer here? We can infer the fact that by quoting Buddha here, he says, if you are a Western philosopher and you did not even aim at understanding Buddhist philosophy, then you cannot be on the road of truth. Or if you tried understanding Buddhist philosophy but didn't pay a lot of attention to it, didn't go all way, if you belong to either of it, then you probably cannot be on the road to truth perfectly. You are going to be making mistakes. So to understand, the whole gist of the passage comes here in this line, quoting Buddha. He quotes Buddha here to make a conclusion of the passage, that what Western philosophers think is wrong. Their hatred towards Buddhist philosophy is wrong. They should actually be either attempting at understanding Buddhist philosophy. If they have attempted, they should go a long way to get the gist of it, the logic of it. What is the tone of the author, everybody? Anshuman, I think Sarah last year has taken a few classes. You could watch them on our channel. They're already saved. You'll have to browse through the channel. That's Catascotti. What's the tone, my children? Okay, let's do something. Let me keep the tone as a homework for you. Let me show you the first line of the article. Read this one. That was the intro of the article. Beyond true and false. But this philosophy is full of contradictions. Contradiction to the Western philosophy. New modern logic is learning why that might be a good thing. New modern logic is people who are lately getting into understanding philosophy. They have to understand why contradictions are a good thing. So it's basically a promotion of Buddhist philosophy here. That was the article's title. Your homework is to write down the tone under my video in the comment section. I'll be checking each comment. I'll be replying to you if I think your answer needs any modification. So make sure you comment under my video with the tone. Okay, that's your homework. Make sure you don't leave the video without liking the video, commenting under my video if you think you've been benefited through the class, sharing the video with your friends and subscribing to the channel. Please follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, and download our app on Google Play. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll see you again on, I'm not checking your answer, Prads and Roosters. I'll check, and Dia, I'll check your answers under my video in the comment section. See you again very, very soon on Thursday. And God bless you, everyone. Have a very good day. What are the different types of tones? Okay. Raj. So you have to be a little regular with the classes. That's why, you know. Though there's a class that I'll be scheduling next month on tone of the author, but till the time, when you're regular, With the classes, you'll know exactly what the tones are. I can't actually jot them down right now. This is a long list. Bye, everyone.